Morning, everyone. My name is Kobus Broderick, and I will be hosting today's Breakfast with Relog session on the topic green and sustainable supply chains. Now, this is another very broad but important topic which we could spend hours and hours on, but for the sake of time, we shortlisted 5 very interesting subtopics for today's session. Each of these topics will be presented by an experienced industry professional, as you can see on the agenda currently on your screen. After the final presentation, we will have a Q&A session where our presenters will answer any of the questions raised during the various presentations. So please make use of the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen and don't be shy to ask any questions. So just before we jump into the first presentation, I would like to play a quick video to kick off the session. So what I truly like about that video is how it suggests that the supply chain is very much like a symphony orchestra, where every part of the supply chain needs to work together in order to make one intricate, complete system. All right, so now without further ado, please let me introduce our first speaker, our founding partner and CEO of Relog, Gary Benneter. He has over 30 years of consulting experience creating and building supply chain distribution infrastructure. Gary has played a major role in introducing new systems and technology players in the local South African landscape and continues to assist in the development of their products so they can best support their customers. Now, today, Gary will be presenting on Thinking Green, the approach needed in developing a sustainable and green supply chain. Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Kobus. Let's just get the technology going. Is this working?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Kobus. Okay, so technology does get us, but I think this is our 4th in our series of Breakfast with Relog, and we're looking forward to a whole lot of other exciting ones. Thinking green and the approach needed in developing sustainable and green supply chain. We talk about green. Our color of our company, Relog, is green. Our focus when we set up Relog is that we needed to focus on sustainability in the supply chain. So what is a green and sustainable supply chain? Let's hope this slide moves. Okay. Really, we have to think about the supply chain from the raw materials through to the supplier, through to manufacturing, through to distribution, through to the retail, and through to the customer. We need a holistic view across the supply chain. The culture of our business needs to think in sustainability, in trying to reduce waste, in trying to make things more efficient and have lower carbon footprints. We need to make sure our objectives are set right up front, top down from the CEO of a company all the way through. We then need to look at the results. And we look at how we measure things and how we optimize things. And we have a green return on investment. And often the green return on investment is perceived to be expensive. It's not really. One needs to just measure it differently and measure it properly. We need to look at, in the supply chain, we need to look at it holistically. We need to look at the packaging that's, for instance, used at the customer end. And is it recycled? Or is it multiple use, or is it one-way use, and does it end up in landfill? So those are some of the problems, and we create those problems in the sustainability by at the start of our supply chain, choosing the wrong sources, choosing the wrong product locations. So for instance, our world has become more luxurious. We get grapes the whole year round, and you'll see that most of the grapes up to maybe this month have come from Egypt and South America and so on. And you think of the carbon footprint on getting them. Do we need grapes the whole year round? So that's a question we need to ask. Okay, so sourcing for green and the wake up from COVID-19. One of the biggest things that happened was that we switched a lot of our sourcing, especially in apparel and clothing, to the Far East, whether it's Bangladesh or China and so on. And COVID-19 gave us a nice wake up, disrupted those supply chains and exposed the sustainability of existing supply chain. And so companies have been forced to reassess the priorities and look at how to source local and what effect there is. I mean, one of the things we had at the beginning of COVID-19, we had all the shutdown in China in January, which then means a lot of, and that was still summer product coming in or early winter product. And then we had a shutdown in South Africa, which meant whatever was shipped late out of China was even later arriving here and hold up. By the time we got it, we'd actually missed the season. So a lot of companies are sitting with a lot of stock they can't sell, which we may have 2020 season in 2021 from a clothing point of view. But did anyone measure the carbon footprint? They looked at lower production cost and lower product cost. They didn't look at the holistic approach. And I think COVID-19 has given a good wake-up call, and I think we will see a lot more local sourcing, and you're seeing that around the world. The other area, obviously, what is already known in green is the building design. It's the genesis of where we started in green building societies, and we have the Green Star rating or BREEAM in the UK, or LEED in Canada, or HQE in France, or GSBC in Germany. And it's very easy to focus on building and construction, and Manfred will give us a little bit more information in the space. But it's the area where we started with a green focus, and it's sometimes seen as expensive or sometimes seen as good. And it's great that we're starting to see all the buildings that are coming up lately have all got allowances for solar panels on their roof structure in the weight that they can carry. There's a lot more natural light. All the lights have switched to LEDs in warehouses. We do not see fluorescence or old-fashioned lighting in the warehouses anymore. There's a lot more insulation and ventilation and temperature control, making the warehouse more sustainable and more friendly to the workers working in it. And the materials used in construction are better and more recyclable. So the whole environment, ecology, and community has been considered in the development, and that's become a standard in what we do in a lot of the development of distribution infrastructure. Okay, how can we ensure green supply chain? Through the design of operations in the distribution infrastructure. We think about the facilities, as I mentioned, the buildings. We think about the equipment, but we also, most importantly, need to think about the design of the operations. And then we need to optimize for the best ROI, but at the same time, a green ROI. We're also looking for competitive edge and lowest life cycle cost. Okay, there is a perception that there's no payback, and that's untrue. There's definitely a payback. We just need to look at our values and take a longer term view. Often we are forced into ROIs in terms of investor relations on the stock exchange, which look for quarterly and annual results. But often you miss the big picture if you look at a long-term view. And if you take a long-term view, the ROI from a green perspective actually gives you a competitive edge, gives you a lot of benefits and cheap payback. And I think that's some of the message that we're trying to get across today. And operational gains equal a competitive edge. The next area that we look at in the green supply chain is transport. About 60% of your supply chain costs actually lie in transport. Generally, transport is the largest carbon footprint and has the highest environmental impact on the supply chain. When we think about the ships and the planes and the trucks, And really, there's a lot of opportunity for optimization, route scheduling, planning, reverse logistics, ensuring transport is full in both ways, optimizing timing, not out of peak hours, utilizing cube, making sure that we are sharing loads. There's a lot of truck design, vehicle selection, driver behavior, and a lot of work and change will happen in this space. And we're looking at faster turnaround at the DC, quicker unloading and loading processes. So that's going to be a major impact on things. I think one of the areas we lack of in South Africa is rail. It's more cost effective for long distance travel. And South Africa is one of the most expensive countries to do work logistically, because the bulk of our economy, 55%, sits up in Gauteng, and it's the most expensive route from a coastal point. South Africa doesn't have navigable waterways, and everything at this stage has moved to road. 95% of all traffic is in road, and I don't believe that that's sustainable. So for imports and exports, everything needs to be integrated with a port and with rail. You need inlet ports, you need de-stuffing facilities. And if you think in South Africa, the Durban to Joburg N3 is a truck route that is almost like a train. I don't know if anyone's driven it recently, but you end up just seeing this row of trucks end to end from Durban to Johannesburg or vice versa. And the other problem is if stuff comes in containers, containers to Joburg on road is very, very expensive. So it's extremely expensive. So effectively, you've got to touch it twice. You've got to de-stuff in Durban, put it into a volume vehicle, and then move it up to Joburg again on road. And so I think there is move to get it onto rail, get it to Joburg and straight onto trucks in Joburg, or containers direct to the customer sites. If we look forward into transport, exciting stuff happening internationally. We're probably, as we are in most things, 10, 20 years behind what happens in other countries. We just recently did a consulting job in Switzerland, and one of the requirements was that we had to consider the Hyperloop that's being planned for 2030, which is a cargo souterrain, which in translation means cargo underground. And so there's a freight transport system, and it's being developed in conjunction with Elon Musk and their systems, and they'll have these systems running underground all the way from the distribution centers into the center of Zurich and major towns, Basel, and eventually all the way down to Geneva. And the idea is that these automated vehicles will drive into the town closest to where the store is, and then there'll be a lift that pops this automated electric vehicle up on the ground, and that will deliver directed to the door of the store the last mile in a very effective way. There's also a move towards electrical trucks and very sexy ergonomic trucks, and there's a picture of something that Walmart's busy talking about. I don't know how far they are on it, but they did put this out there, and it's a very sexy truck. I mean, you saw one of those coming down the road, you'd be quite excited. But there's going to be big investment in change, and there's real benefits. And one of the things, if we look at truck transport, we're a little bit behind, because if you look at the development over the last 30 years of what's happened with cars and their efficiency and the engines and the way they've worked is much further advanced and had major leaps and changes compared to what's happened with trucks. Trucks are still quite slow in their development, but I think you'll start to see some accelerated development soon. And the other side of transport, which we tend to ignore, is integrating your transport in your distribution. And there's work around on your actual distribution site, the effective movement of trucks, the managing of your fleets on the site, having yard and dock software systems, making sure the runouts and the parking is correct, so it doesn't take you time to reverse into a parking bay and align the truck and waste time that you could be having that truck on the road. And the more time that you get out of your truck, the less trucks you have on the road, because the more cycles you can get out of your vehicle. So and one of the things we focus on is designing appropriate facilities, the gatehouse, the fueling, the returns facility, the workshops, washing, so that that whole cycle of the vehicle on the site is actually less. than the time it takes traditionally, and you may gain 10, 15 minutes a day per truck on site every time it comes on site through a good design. And that 10 to 15 minutes a day adds up. If you've got a fleet of 400 trucks, that's a lot of minutes that multiplies out, and you can actually save a lot of vehicles in your fleet. So it has quite a big effect, and something that's ignored. One of the other areas people tend to overlook is the building investment that you can make. And if the floor is wrong, all operations are compromised, and you affect the productivity and the machine life. And those, Anton will take you through a little bit more of this, how you can optimize productivity in your supply chain through a better operation. And if you have inherent inefficiencies in the design of your infrastructure, the wrong type of flow, the wrong doors in the wrong places, the wrong floor, the wrong floor construction, levels and tolerances, all of those will impinge on your ability to achieve productivity. So effectively, when we're looking at supply chains, we're looking at using less resources, less waste, less travel, less errors, less people, less touches, less energy, less machines, less confusion, but actually pushing up your productivity, your accuracy, your efficiency. And if you get all of those things right, you actually have a green operation in your supply chain. Okay, and I suppose the last thing is this proverb that came from a Cree Indian proverb. Only when the last tree is cut, only when the last river is polluted, only when the last fish is caught, only then will you realize that you cannot eat money. So the question is this the end, or is this the beginning of the end? Hopefully you won't find that we're at the end and despondent, and you'll learn a lot in today's presentations to take us into a more sustainable future. You need to contact me, our details on this slide, and I'll hand over back to the team. Thanks, Kobus and Anton and my team for setting this up.
Thank you, Gary. That was a very well-rounded presentation, and that last quote, it really makes one think of where we are and what we need to do next. All right, so for the sake of time, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Manfred Braun. Manfred currently holds the position of Director, Environmental Sustainability at UCT, where he leads the strategy and implementation of environmental sustainability across all spheres of the university. He is also serving as a non-executive director of the Green Building Council of South Africa in a voluntary role since August earlier this year. Manfred's background is a professional electrical engineer and worked for WSP Group for over 10 years designing and project managing the delivery of various large design construction projects. Here, he also started and led WSP's green building business for 3 years. After this, Manfred worked at the Green Building Council of South Africa for just under 10 years, where he was responsible for directing all technical and training-related matters, as well as being an executive on the board. Manfred is speaking on the topic, green buildings, better for profit, people, and the planet. Manfred, over to you.
Great, thanks, Kobus. I'll just do a quick sound check if you can hear and see my presentation.
Yes, perfect.
Cool. Okay, great. And thanks to Relog for the invitation. It's great to be here this morning. Yeah, my sort of journey with Gary started back in about 2008. We worked on the ShopRite DC and Centurion together, which was a great project because ShopRite was really keen on integrating sustainability into that project. And so there was huge scope. If you think about it, the volume of concrete and steel and all of that going into a distribution center like that, it was really a fantastic project and a great team to work with. So it's good to be here. I'm going to just do a brief introduction, and after the introduction, I'm going to switch my own video off just to make sure the sound is coming across well. But I'll just start briefly with an introduction to myself, and my sort of passion for the environment started really as a young child, as a teenager growing up, and often in the holidays going to the bush. So I grew up in Pretoria and often went to the Kruger and to Nelspruit, that sort of area, and really fell in love with wildlife and the natural environment. And at the time, the rhino population was really going down significantly, and there was a whole Save the Rhino drive. And that's really kind of where a lot of my passion began. And at the same time, sort of grew a love for engineering and technology and all of that. So kind of combined that and ended up studying engineering and working at WSP and starting a green buildings division. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying the role at UCT. And still, I really try and influence my own family and our love for wildlife and conservation. And so kind of trying to pass that on to the next generation. So I'm going to focus on buildings, as Gary mentioned. A lot of you are probably familiar with some of these things, but I want to touch on some of the key market drivers, and then just touch on some of the easy wins. So let me just switch my video off just to make sure that that doesn't cause a lag or any delay. Let's see. Okay. Corbus, just wanted to check if you can still, if the sound is still all fine in the video and the presentation.
Yes, we can hear you, and the presentation is clear.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. So this graphic on the left is compliments of the Green Building Council South Africa, and really speaks to the proportion of global emissions that buildings are responsible for, and it's really a very significant number, and that's why buildings play such a key role in the fight to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. In Cape Town, quite interestingly enough, that statistic is much higher. It's about 59% of carbon emissions in the city are from buildings. So that really is quite scary and tells you how critical that role is. This is kind of a little bit more detailed breakdown. I won't go into the detail, but you can kind of see the three sectors: industrial, commercial, residential, that make up that 59%. And so the retail sector is really sitting within that industrial and commercial sector, which is a big proportion. And then we didn't forget agriculture as well. Obviously, that's feeding, and transport, that's kind of part of that supply chain. So actually a very significant proportion that the retail sector sits in. This is a study done quite a while ago, a couple of years back, just looking at different industries in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and how to reduce them, and which sectors sort of offer the biggest opportunity at the lowest cost. And you kind of look at all those different sectors, and you see buildings on the far left have got the biggest proportion of low cost emissions reductions compared to many other sectors. So really is kind of a great opportunity to tackle for industry. Then you look at water. Here's a kind of a very high level breakdown of fresh water and where most of our fresh water goes. So again, buildings is a big proportion, but irrigation is a huge, sort of much bigger proportion. So again, the retail sector, both from buildings but also supply chain, playing a very significant role in the use of fresh water. Something obviously very key at the moment, but kind of always been a key part of green buildings, is how do we improve the health of our staff and our customers in terms of their own personal well-being in the space, and how does that space contribute to health and well-being of these customers and staff. And then the other one that I wanted to mention that really buildings have a significant impact is land use and our ecology and ecosystems. You just have to take a large DC like this one from Woolworths in Centurion next to the ShopRite one. Both of those and many of the DCs have got massive tracts of land that need to be used, and so take up a lot of space, and that could be going towards ecosystems and things like that, and or could be arable land. So there's this kind of fight between development and our sort of natural habitat that we kind of need to look after. So there's this balance that needs to be found while we're trying to develop, is how do we maintain and improve our ecosystems and arable land and all of that. Gary touched on this as well, and this is some of the aspects that will come up in some of the other presentations as well. I'm not going to dive into too much detail, but really a key consideration then is also the carbon footprint and the water footprint of the actual supply chain in terms of all the produce that is produced and sold, whether it's carbon or water. Really key to consider that as part of this journey as well. I've added this link. I'm not going to go there now, but it's really an interesting link. If you have a look at that, you can literally look at every pretty much every food type and get sort of a global average in terms of water footprint. Very sort of user-friendly site that's very interesting, just to see all sorts of different products, from apples to flour to beef, all sorts of things. Very interesting. So just then to kind of highlight then just how important and sort of critical focusing on buildings is. It's really what we call the low-hanging fruit: low cost, easy to access, and juicy. So really key focus needs to be had on buildings. I wanted to touch briefly on some of the key market drivers in this space. Obviously, talking about retail, so increased sales is really a key market driver. And that's, you kind of would certainly have seen that in South Africa in the last 10 years, sort of a growing awareness from different retailers around sustainability and green buildings. This was a study actually from 20 years ago in the US across 108 stores. I'm just picking one simple concept, increased daylight, and they compared 108 stores. 2/3 of those had skylights and 1/3 no skylights, and they really found a fascinating correlation between sales and the amount of daylight in the space, and where they would see kind of likely seeing 40% higher sales with addition of skylights. So something kind of quite simple as a study, but quite revealing. And there are quite a few examples like that where certain green building features have this ability to really push up sales and drive foot traffic through a space, make it more attractive, more interesting, but certainly have a very positive effect on sales. Some of the other key drivers I've just summarized on this page, in the South African context, is national regulation and standards. In 2011, the SANS 10400 XA for new buildings or major refurbishments was developed, that really focuses only on energy. I'm not sure you're aware, but there has been a major update, and the draft has been published and it's gone out for comment and gone back to SABS, and that's basically looking at about a 50% reduction even further in terms of energy consumption that'll be required. So when that comes out, probably the next 6 to 12 months, that's going to have a significant impact on new buildings and major refurbishments. So just look out for that and plan for that if you are budgeting for projects and so on, for that revision to that SANS 10400 XA regulation. Then another big driver obviously is the return on investment that you see from the energy or utility cost savings. There's some great research done by the Green Building Council, the Association of Quantity Surveyors, and TUX, just looking at certified buildings and just quantifying some of that. And part of the study was also looking at from MSCI, looking at the return on investment of Green Star rated buildings versus non-Green Star rated buildings. That unfortunately was limited only to office buildings, but I think a lot of those lessons certainly apply to the retail sector as well. Then you've got, besides those factors, you've then also got voluntary standards and market competition that's driving some of this behavior in the retail sector. This was the Palmyra Junction Woolworths store that achieved first they achieved a 5-star, so that plaque that I'm holding there, handing over to the store manager, was a 5-star rating, and then they improved it. I think about 2 years later, they then achieved a 6-star rating. So it's really great to kind of see how it's been driving behavior and leadership. Not that it's being rolled out across all these Woolworths stores, but what happens, it becomes sort of a benchmark for a retailer, and they can kind of see how far can they go. You might have seen a couple of years back this store sort of talking about how much good they're doing, and they were really, I think, proud of themselves, which is great. But at the time, they had no external benchmark. So going through this Green Star process highlighted some gaps and kind of really kind of showed them how do they actually compare internationally and locally in terms of benchmarking themselves. Sometimes if you only benchmark yourselves against your own internal benchmarks, you don't have that sort of sense of how you compare to others. So this was really a useful process for Woolworths in benchmarking themselves against Green Star, and not just their own system. So they found that incredibly useful, and really kind of has given them a lot of insight into the future around where their focus should be. Okay, so lastly, wanted to focus on some of the easy wins. I've talked about the why of energy, but you can kind of look at retail stores or warehousing, and this is kind of a typical breakup of where the biggest energy consumption lies. And so that's typically where one should focus the energy. You think about roughly, and it obviously is kind of slightly different for different buildings, roughly about 40% on HVAC and refrigeration. So there's a huge opportunity to tackle. About 30% on lighting, 20% on equipment and computers and so on. So something that's quite interesting is kind of, you think, well, this green building thing seems quite novel sort of over the last 20 years, but actually, is it really? How were buildings built many years ago, and how were they comfortable? How were they efficient? Here's two examples. One of a Zulu village near Shawi in KwaZulu-Natal, and here's another one is Khoisan sort of home, and this one is quite interesting because that's actually also can move and can adapt to different sort of conditions. One very hot and one very cold, because the desert obviously is very hot during the day and cold at night. So green buildings is certainly not a new thing, but what happened is one of the things that I certainly think influenced this significantly is the invention of the air conditioner. Then also often the drive for glass, and that's, I mean, it's obviously nice to have buildings and retail buildings with a lot of glass, but you put those two together, a lot of glass and air conditioning, we kind of often forget about how to build buildings. And the other one that I think has really kind of put pressure on us building efficiently is the time and cost pressures that come with the construction sector, in particular in South Africa with the high interest rate. I think that has really driven that often. I mean, many of you will know when you kind of, the guys are pouring concrete and you're still busy doing the design and so on. So that happens a lot in South Africa. So there's a lot of pressure, and that often doesn't allow for sort of options analysis and looking at all sorts of different kinds of things. So those are some of the things that I think have influenced why we don't always design efficiently. Something to always remember is passive design, how you can make your building, the facade and the envelope respond to the local environment, looking at the sort of sun path and what the wind is doing, all of that, and taking that into account with your shading and your facade and your glazing and all of that. Understanding what the airflows will be, I mean, this is typically what your architect and engineers should be doing. But as I said, often you have those time and cost pressures that just don't allow for this. You have kind of other constraints and you think, oh, we'll just throw some air conditioning at it to solve that problem. I'm not going to go into detail on each of these, but there's been some great examples of innovation around HVAC and refrigeration in the retail sector. That Woolworths project in Palmyra Junction I mentioned, they did a CO2 refrigeration system, which is super energy efficient and obviously also zero, what's it, GWP or ODP rating. So that's kind of a great example of innovation and it's taught them a lot. I'm not sure how many others of those are kind of rolling out in the country. Then you have kind of things like ammonia coming back in some instances, quite tricky to work with, but again, quite innovative. I've got this picture up of the waterfront in Cape Town, which is using a heat rejection system into the seawater, which is basically for a large proportion of the year is a free form of cooling because the seawater basically cools that water down to about 14 degrees. It's a closed loop, so you don't have any seawater going into the HVAC system. You've got basically the pipes lying in the seawater, and that basically provides, as I said, for a large portion of the year free cooling, which is a great innovation. Obviously, we don't all have the opportunity with cold seawater right next to us, but you also have possibility of ground source heat rejection. There's some great examples of that. Also a little bit more expensive if you have to drill vertically, but there certainly are all kinds of different opportunities and how we can push our HVAC and refrigeration load down. Lighting, Gary's mentioned this as well, is a key driver and something that often is forgotten also is the higher your lighting load is, especially in retail, the higher your HVAC load will be. So that's something that's really key and something that is also worth considering is the lighting levels traditionally in retail have been really quite high, sort of between 500 and 1,000 lux. But it is quite exciting also just to see some different store concept designs where those lighting levels have come significantly down and there's been much stronger sort of emphasis on accent lighting on products. So there certainly are creative ways that you can reduce your lighting loads, whether it's controls or design, besides the actual equipment itself and driving towards LEDs and so on. Then the other one, and I'm looking forward to the presentation in more detail on this later on this morning, is really kind of a big opportunity in retail for renewable energy on site. We've seen a lot of that already around the country, whether it's in car parks or whether it's on roofs, on the warehouses, or on the shopping centers and things like that. Interesting one is the one on the right, which the first few installations have gone in South Africa. This one on the right is at the Vineyard Hotel, which is a combination PV and solar thermal. So if you need hot water, it's quite an interesting one because the efficiency is quite good, pretty good on the PV as well. But it is quite a very sort of specific solution that depends on the sort of the combination of a need for hot water and electrical energy, and sort of a reasonably good payback. Depends again on what your sort of investment returns requirements are, but I think for this installation it was about between 10 and 15 years. I know that's not for most many investors, they're looking at not more than 5 years, but certainly some great innovation there. So how far can we go? Here's a great example. Premier Foods, this distribution center developed by Equitas in Lordsview Industrial Park. They achieved a net zero carbon rating from the Green Building Council South Africa, which basically means the net zero carbon basically means that over a period of a year, over 12 months, you basically produce as much energy from on-site renewables as you consume from council. So basically you get to sort of you kind of plus the renewable minus the municipal supply, you get to a net zero number for the year. Obviously, we can improve on that if we have sort of a net positive, if we have more renewable energy produced over the year, which would be great. The challenge is often the feed-in doesn't always make sense. You kind of typically can only do that on weekends maybe, or you need a bigger site maybe where that can feed into other buildings. But that certainly there are examples of that. And then the next level again is regenerative design. How can our buildings be regenerative and restorative in terms of the natural systems and so on? So I think there's some sort of exciting sort of frontiers in the space. You might have heard of something called the Living Building Challenge. If you haven't, check it out. I think it's really kind of an exciting sort of next frontier in the space, which is really kind of starting to enter the South African market and starting to push boundaries even further. Great. So I'm going to close off just with this quote from one of my heroes. It's in your hands to create a better world for all who live in it. So let's do this. Let's do this together. Great. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Manfred, for that very interesting presentation. We are running a little bit over time, but I do see that we haven't received any questions. So just to all the attendees, please remember to raise any questions that you have as we go along. So let's quickly move on to our next presenter, Greg Blanford. Greg is an experienced director and has been at Rubicon South Africa for the past 20 years. He has been a key role player in the renewable energy sector in South Africa and currently holds the chairman position at the Association for Renewable Energy Practitioners. Greg has been involved in numerous projects in his career, including BMW and Mercedes body shops, and the negotiation for Rubicon to become a distribution partner for both Imeon Energy and Tesla's Powerwall systems in South Africa. Today, Greg will be presenting on sustainability and the renewable energy revolution. Thank you, Greg. Over to you.
Thanks, Cobus. Thanks very much for the kind introduction. And also thanks very much to Manfred. It was a fantastic presentation. I definitely want to hook up with you sometime and discuss green building initiatives going forward. Okay, so just maybe a quick introduction on myself. I'm very passionate about sustainability, renewable energy, and it's what gets me out of bed every morning. You know, sustainability is a large topic as well as energy. And I think we can only touch the tip of the iceberg in a session like this. But just in my own context, I've tried to live a sustainable life, and I think looking at it from an individual aspect, if we all, you know, did or lived in a sustainable way, you know, I think we could achieve a lot more further down the line as far as a country is concerned, or a planet. So, you know, as far as energy is concerned, I have a net positive contribution on energy. I'm completely off the grid at home. We recycle our water, we recycle glass, plastic, cardboard, etc. So, yeah, the lifestyle has also been transferred over to my children and family. Yeah, and it's all about living a sustainable lifestyle. Okay, so let me just a bit on Rubicon. So we've been around for the last 34 years, primarily involved in the automation space, and over the last 10 to 15 years in the renewable energy space. And what we try and do and achieve in South Africa is to bring cutting edge technologies to South Africa, like Tesla, etc., and introduce them to our market. as I said, I'm very passionate about sustainability and long-term sustainability of renewable energy. I think if you're making an investment of 25 years into an asset, I think that asset should last for 25 years with the warranties that are in place. So, we endeavor in pushing high quality, sustainable solutions for the renewable energy sector of South Africa. Okay, so I'm going to share I'm going to also switch off my video and then share my screen. Let me get there quickly.
All right. Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Stop my video. Okay, so is that fine? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can perfectly hear you.
Okay, so as I said, a big topic. I'm not going to waste too much time. Let me get started. I thought I'd just share our mission. So our mission is a product and services hub focused on enabling the decentralization, digitalization, and decarbonization of energy. And I think this is quite key because, in the modern age, we're fighting against carbonized sources of energy like coal, oil, nuclear, etc. And we're trying to play a part in that ecosystem moving forward with the decarbonization of energy, which is the biggest factor for us. Okay, so I thought I'd share this with you. This is quite an interesting one because it's giving a little bit of background to where we are currently in man's sort of evolution going forward. If you look at this graph on the right-hand side, you can see pretty much where the Industrial Revolutions started, the Black Death or plague. There was all of a sudden a huge exponential explosion in the population growth over the last 500 to 600 years. And that's a lot of that's due to the ease at which things are done, just the way we've become mechanized, become smarter, etc. And the projection is that 2025 we'd be at 8 billion, strong. And also, it was quite interesting to see this little notch where the Black Plague is. That was the impact over there of the Black Death or Plague, is that little notch there. Just some facts and figures. This Millennium Ecosystem Assessment calculated extinctions. So this is extinctions based on animals and plant life on the planet at 8,700 per annum. And there are an estimated 9 million species on the planet. That's both plant and animal. 640,000 tons of fishing nets are left in the seas every year, and this is a big problem. You often see fish, sharks, whales, etc., dying in our oceans because of fishing nets that are left there, also contributing to the vast amounts of plastic that are left in our oceans and consumed by fish and other sea life. So since the dawn of civilization, man has caused 83% of all the loss of all 83% of all the wild mammals on the planet. And in the last 50 years alone, 60% on average on the loss of mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, etc. And 23% of true wilderness remains on our planet. And with 1 million species are threatened with extinction. So these are frightening statistics, and I see we do see this on a regular basis on various documentaries. The recent one by David Attenborough on our planet, and just to see the impact of man and exactly this growth curve that you see here, and there are reasons for that. So what can we do to make a difference? I think if we look at our basic human needs, we require energy, we require water and food. And I think these are the biggest drivers which have caused the biggest impact on our planet as far as sustainability is concerned. You know, we've moved forward, everybody's looking, you know, to grow personal wealth, to live a decent life, etc. And these are the factors that have contributed. I think that they're a byproduct and not intentional. So I want to look specifically at energy. So if we break down energy and sustainable energy sources, solar, wind, hydro, tidal energy, geothermal, and biomass. If we look in a South African context, we can see solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, sorry, not geothermal, and biomass are already in South Africa. I'm not aware of any tidal or geothermal energy systems currently in the country. But to break that down further, specifically in the solar energy space, this is where we play, is either ground mount solar or commercial, industrial, and residential solar systems. And this can be broken down further into energy storage, electric vehicles, and specifically charging infrastructure, power quality, energy efficient interventions. So there are other interventions such as greywater harvesting, etc. But relevant to this discussion, I'll be focusing on these 5 key elements at the top of the slide. So as Manfred mentioned earlier, I think the low-hanging fruit, especially from a commercial aspect and retail sector, you can see, as he had mentioned in his previous slides, the impact of carbon on our environment and how we can actively reduce the carbon footprint in our own context. So I think in many cases, we're not aware of the amount of solar that's being installed in South Africa. If just at a high level, outside of the government programs, between 2015 and 2020, private installations of solar totaled around 1 gigawatt of energy supplied to the grid outside of any REIT programs. And currently, and this is quite an interesting statistic, is that coal is coal energy or production of energy from coal is more expensive than renewable energy, specifically solar PV. We did a study on our local municipality to see what the purchase value was from Eskom versus what can be produced by an independent power producer, and there was quite a substantial gap. On our last calculations, on a commercial style project, we were looking at around 75 cents per kilowatt hour versus around 95 cents per kilowatt hour from Eskom. So there's quite a significant price difference there. So it's commonly used for commercial industrial clients. This example on the right-hand side of this picture is Randridge Mall in Pretoria. It's a large carport structure, and then on the shopping center itself, there's a large PV system. This one covering roughly 60% of the energy needs. What's interesting is that, and a lot of people are not quite aware of this, is that this is a 25-year asset, and once installed, it should produce energy for 25 years or longer. After 25 years, the energy degradation per panel is roughly at 0.7%. So after the 25-year period, you'd still roughly have 80% of the full capacity of the system available to produce energy. There are a couple of factors to look at. So if from an energy perspective for a shopping center or for commercial business, you're either looking at a cost reduction, energy security, or energy independence. And I think there are 3 different discussion points there. Cost reduction is definitely the low-hanging fruit, where you just want to reduce your energy bill as a commercial client, etc., or even from a homeowner's perspective. Energy security is the addition of backup systems, backup power in case of load shedding. And we're seeing this more and more common, being commonly addressed in a commercial environment where there's an addition of gensets to supply additional energy in the case of load shedding. The energy independence is a different animal altogether, because that's when you become independent of the grid. And typically that's large battery packs that then support the load during load shedding, and using self-consumption models to offset your energy usage. The benefits are that you can create a decentralized energy network. So currently in South Africa, we have Eskom supplying the majority of the power. But as we move forward, governments recently declared that municipalities will be able to procure energy from independent power producers. And this is speaking directly to the decentralized energy network. So commercial clients or clients that have large buildings that are able to accommodate solar on their roofs can then inject power into the grid and sell off the excess energy to municipalities and become an energy provider. In essence, a mini Eskom. It creates energy independence, as I said. We've commonly seen with tax incentives return on investment of between 2.5 to 4 years in most cases. In general, without the tax incentives, we see commonly between 3 and 4 years being the return on investment and payback on the system. So currently with our interest rate sitting at 7%, loans from banks, you can commonly fund projects of this nature directly out of the savings. So there's no, you continue to pay your bill, but at a cost now that you can accommodate the full installation of a solar system. That a lot of people are also not quite aware of this 12B tax incentive. I'm not sure how much longer it will be around, but typically for a commercial installation, SARS will allow a write-off of 100% of the full value of the system in the first year, up to a megawatt. Anything over that would be written off over 3 years. Carbon credits, also very interesting. These can be calculated and be written off as credits, either sold to those who require carbon credits, or can be offset against tax at the end of the financial year. Energy storage. Okay, so the picture on the right is the new Tesla Megapack, large commercial style storage. At this stage in South Africa, in certain cases, this can make sense to integrate this with solar, and you can typically run large-scale installations off the grid and become energy independent. But this definitely pushes up your return on investment calculation, roughly doubling your time frame to get a return on your investment. So typically around 6 years to 7 years, even up to 10 years in some cases. But the big benefit of this is that you can create a device which then supplies backup power in the event of load shedding. Peak shaving, the units can be programmed to shave. If there's a peak energy draw, the battery would supplement the load and shave off the peak, so that you don't have these huge maximum demand charges on your energy bills. There again, load shifting in the same sense. These systems are predominantly lithium-based technologies, and there's different chemical makeups of these batteries. Tesla uses NMC, which is a nickel, manganese, and cobalt chemistry. The design life is 15 years, and they can accommodate up to 20 years design life on these systems. So the costs of these systems are decreasing, and that's primarily driven by demand. Now, globally, there's a huge drive towards energy efficiency and long-term sustainability of solar, and many factories are being built both in Europe, the US, and in China to accommodate the demand for lithium-based energy storage products. And as a result of the overall cost of lithium is dropping. So it's making that return on investment more attractive. And these systems can be scaled from small scale home usage right up to utility scale. We've seen in Australia quite recently the 100 megawatt hour battery pack, and in South Africa, Eskom's in discussions currently for a large scale battery pack. I think it's in the region of 300 to 400 megawatt hours. Okay, this is an interesting one. The electric vehicle revolution is coming. We've done some testing with one of the major motor manufacturers in South Africa for new vehicles in the Kalahari, where we've tested vehicles, electric vehicles for our South African environment. So both BMW, Nissan, Volkswagen have all got electric vehicles currently in South Africa in various quantities. By the vast majority, BMW and Nissan, roughly 1,000 units in South Africa. And this is where it becomes interesting because a lot of commercial clients, specifically shopping centers and retail centers, are installing solar, and a way to attract the higher LSM client to your shopping center is to put in an EV charger, and these chargers are not typically too expensive, and they are typically installed at the front entrance of a building next to the disabled parking bays. And what this enables is really, firstly, to showcase your green credentials in combination with a solar energy program. So often a shopping center, for instance, if they implement a solar program, the general public don't see those solar panels on the roof. They don't know, that the shopping center has green credentials, etc. The electric vehicles become part and parcel to showcase this green initiative. And yeah, it's the next revolution. I think quite exciting to see by 2030, VW will only produce EVs and no internal combustion engines anymore. Yeah, very, very exciting to see this development. And also from an emissions perspective, there are no emissions. I know there's been a lot of debate around the composition of lithium batteries and the sustainability of lithium longer term. And my answer to that is just to say, really, as technology progresses, and currently the technology around batteries is progressing at an exponential rate, where we see lithium-based batteries in combination with supercapacitors, graphene-based superconductors, etc., will enable electric vehicles to charge within 15 seconds and drive 1,000 kilometers per charge. And our energy networks need to support this going forward. So the combination of solar energy storage and electric vehicles makes a much more sustainable model going forward. Just for interest's sake, an electric vehicle has less than 25 moving parts, including all the door hinges and mirrors. And typically the vehicle would have 2 to 4 motors on the wheels. So yeah, just an interesting fact. Energy efficiencies. I know Manfred has spoken about this. Yeah.
If I don't know how many slides you have left, we're just running out of time.
Yeah, last one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so energy efficiency is really speaking about, when we do projects, energy efficiencies is top priority, looking at the building automation, the lighting, occupancy sensors, hot water solutions, personal space, cooling, etc. These are things that need to be looked at before projects are implemented on sustainability, specifically around buildings and PV. Yeah, and then just last slide, just a quote from David Attenborough: many individuals are doing what they can, but real success can only come if there is a change in our societies and our economics and our politics. From David Attenborough. Thank you very much.
All right. So thank you, Greg, and apologies for interrupting you. All right, so without wasting any more time, not wasting time, but let's move on to our second last presentation from Andy. Andy is passionate about the development sector and seeks to find innovative ways to improve the lives of vulnerable people and communities. Andy has a long history of serving vulnerable communities across the country and joined Food Forward South Africa back in 2013, where he currently holds the position of Managing Director. Food Forward South Africa is a registered NPO focused on nationwide hunger relief efforts using a unique model called food banking, which involves the recovery of quality, edible, surplus food from the food supply chain for redistribution to address food insecurity. Today, Andy will be discussing surplus food recovery, opportunities, and constraints. Andy, over to you, and if I can please ask you to keep it as short as you possibly can. Thanks.
Excellent. Can you hear me, Cobus?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, and we can also see your presentation. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd like to thank Relog for the invitation, and also to the very interesting presentations by the previous presenters. So thank you very much. I'm also going to switch my video off so that we can focus on the presentation, and I'm gonna go as fast as I can.
Thanks.
So thank you very much for that. So we're a bit different to the other presentations. Our organization is we operate in the non-profit sector. We are a non-profit organization, but the business we do is with people in the for-profit sector, so agri-sector, wholesale, retail, and manufacturing sector. And our core business is the recovery of edible surplus food from the supply chain, which we use to feed people. So the research shows that around 1/3 of all the food produced in South Africa ends up in landfill, while more than 14 million people in the country goes hungry. Those are sources by CSIR study, which they are updating, and they have been for the past year. So in the next few months, we should get an updated study, and I'm sure we're going to be shocked by what we see there. And Oxfam said that 14 million people were hungry, but 14 million people were at risk of hunger. And we find now with the pandemic that those other 14 million are going hungry because of the dynamics within our economy and unemployment. And so we're finding that roughly half our population is going hungry. So let's create distinctions between food loss and food waste. And we need to create these distinctions because the people we do business with in the agri sector, wholesale, retail, and manufacturing, they refer to everything as food waste, and they should be referring to it as food surplus. So food loss takes place at the production. So in the agri sector, when they're busy making stuff, storage, processing, and distribution stages in the food value chain. But that's where food is still usable, and if intercepted in time, we can use that to feed people. Food waste refers to food that is of good quality and fit for human consumption, but does not get consumed because it is discarded either before or after it is left to spoil. And it's interesting and encouraging to see the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. So for this year, for the first time, they put a landmark date in International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. And I think it's important because we need to have conversations around waste reductions quite urgently. So where in the food value chain is this waste? Roughly 50% of the waste takes place during harvesting. So on the agri side with farmers, then processing, packaging, and distribution and retail account for a further 45%. And the remaining 5% of food waste is on the side of the consumers. So we can clearly see that our efforts to divert food must be directed at the pre-consumer side. Why do we have surpluses? Largely because of overproduction, over-ordering, incorrectly labeled products. So, for example, the manufacturer runs 20 million units of something, and if the label was incorrectly put on or the wrong wording was on the label, that product can't go on the shelf, but the contents inside that packaging is perfectly edible, and those are the goods that we receive donated from our supply chain partners. Date labeling is a major issue, and we know that the Department of Health, along with the Department of Trade and Industry, are re-looking at how they approach this so that we can have fewer issues of food ending up as lost or wasted because of date labeling and short-dated products, damaged goods throughout the supply chain, and then errors in the manufacturing, packaging, and logistics phases. How big is the problem? Well, according to the Department of Environment, Forestry, and Fisheries in 2018, South Africa generated 55 million tons of general waste, and only 11% of this waste was diverted from landfill. That means close to 90% ended up in our landfills. And more than 50% of this was organic waste, and around 10 million tons of this food, costing the economy 61 billion rand annually, is food waste. And these calculations don't take into account the wasted water and energy resources combined with the cost of disposing the waste, which adds up to huge losses to our economy and our environment. So what our organization does is we connect this world of excess or surplus to a world of need, and we recover this beautiful quality edible surplus food from farmers, manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. And we call this process food banking. This is essentially how it works. On the left-hand side, we have our supply chain partners that work with us. And on the right-hand side, we have our beneficiary organization partners. So creches, early childhood development organizations focusing on women, abused women and children, frail and aged care facilities, skills development for youth. Those are the kind of organizations that get our food. So roughly 75% of our beneficiary organization population focuses on education, skills development, youth, and women. So in many respects, food is used here as a catalyst for social development in underserved communities. We are prevalent in all of the 9 provinces, and we collect food in 2 ways. The traditional method, which we call warehouse food banking, is we'll go to a distribution center for one of our retailers, Pick n Pay, Woolworths, not Woolworths, Pick n Pay, Shoprite, Checkers, one of those. And we'll collect edible surplus food. We bring it into our warehouses, check it, sort it, stored, and then redistribute that. Charities. We also have a piece of digital technology which has been operating for 4 years now, so that we can intercept food at retail stores. So we connect our beneficiary organizations, and within a 5-kilometer radius where there's a Pick n Pay, Food Lovers Market, or Woolworths store, they can go and collect surplus there either on a daily basis or whenever the store has those surpluses available. And we are in the process of rolling out food share with Pick n Pay, Woolworths, and Food Lovers Market stores nationally as we speak. So last financial year, we distributed 5,600, actually, sorry, for the financial year this year, we distributed 5,600 tons of food, equating to 22 million meals, and it cost us only 85 cents this cost per meal. So because all the food is free, and all we are covering is the infrastructure costs, getting food from the supplier and getting it to our beneficiary organizations, it costs us just 85 cents. It's the most economical method of addressing food insecurity in the world. We support over 1,500 beneficiary organizations that get food from us every single month so that they can feed the people in their communities, vulnerable people. And those 1,000 beneficiaries collectively feed 475,000 people daily. Some do a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, such as our facilities that care for orphans and vulnerable children and aged care facilities, and others do maybe 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day. It just depends. And food banking, we found, is also an environmental solution because reducing food waste and loss is the 3rd most effective solution for fighting climate change. So I think it's worth a special focus. And then the WWF did a study on our model just close to 2 years ago now, and found that for every ton of food that we recover, 4 tons of greenhouse gas emissions are saved. Why surplus food recovery makes sense? It's economical. It costs us just 85 cents to be able to facilitate the delivery of 1 meal. All this quality food we receive is donated. We can increase access to food for those who need it. And we've distributed in the last 7 months 5,600 tons of food, equating to 222.4 million meals. Our impact is measurable, and we give tax benefits to our food donors for the food that they donate, which improves their bottom line savings, and they save millions of rands because they don't have to dump things in landfill, which cost huge amounts of money, or have to incinerate that stock. And of course, our model is environmentally friendly. What are some of the challenges? Most of the food waste occurs on the pre-consumer side. So in agri-manufacturing and retail, that's where we need to focus our efforts. There is a lack of data on the actual causes of food waste, and the research that we have is outdated. And we still have a huge amount of actors in the food value chain that are dumping or incinerating good quality edible surplus food. And we really need to engage with supply chain partners to encourage them not to do so. And we need national and provincial policy to provide a framework for recovery of edible surplus food. We've drafted our own policy, and it's sitting with the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, as well as with the Democratic Alliance. We're going to be able to table that, and hopefully we'll get some of this policy enacted in Parliament. The Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries says that have organic waste to landfill targets. And they've said 2022 that there must be a 50% reduction, and 2027 a 100% reduction of organic waste to landfill. And we think we need to do much more, and we need to act sooner. And we need food value chain partners to be transparent about their food loss and surplus data, and set hard targets to work towards reduction is what's needed. Where are the opportunities? So food security, NPOs can take huge amounts of this edible surplus food and use it to feed people. The tomatoes you see on your left, we get, those are beautiful tomatoes, but either they've over harvested, or the supplier says it's too small, also they're out of specification. And at the bottom of that slide, you see we make our own pasta sauce and tomato jam using surplus tomatoes. So there are huge amounts of opportunities here. Agri-processing is something we're going to do quite a bit, because we're working with farmers and through Agri-SA and this Growers Association to unlock these services from farmers. And there's some job creation opportunities. Small industries, micro-manufacturing can be set up to be able to sell these goods, as well as income generation. Unemployed people can be used to sell these products in local communities for very low cost. And there's a lot of beneficiation throughout the waste economy taking place, where people are taking waste and turning it into energy, or taking waste and they're using that to dehydrate, or whatever the case may be, which is encouraging to see. And we need more meaningful collaboration between food value chain actors and the recipients of surplus food. I'm going to leave it there, Kobus. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you for speeding through that presentation. I really do appreciate it. There's some shocking facts in that presentation of yours, which is a real eye-opener. Thank you for that. I just saw in the Q&A section there was a few questions, and Greg, thank you for answering the questions. Since we are running over time, I'm not sure if we will have enough time to go through all the questions. So if I can ask the panelists to please have a look at the questions that was raised, and if you could answer them as we go into the last presentation, I would appreciate that. And then if you pose the question, just keep an eye out if someone has answered it for you. So let's move into our last presentation by my colleague, Anton Kutsia. Anton has been working in the retail and distribution space for more than 10 years. He has significant experience in the implementation of distribution infrastructure, coordinating logistic projects with sites in excess of 30 hectares. Further to site development, planning, building design, construction, and large-scale projects, Anton's consulting role extends to setting up supply chains, including internal distribution, operation design, technical procurement, and fit out. Now, today, Anton will be presenting on the topic, efficient processes and design contribute to sustainable operations. Anton, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Koos. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thanks, Koos, for the intro, and a good morning to all the listeners. We've covered a vast range of topics on sustainability today. I'm briefly going to touch on how efficient distribution operations contribute to sustainability. So what is sustainable operations exactly? Being sustainable means to continue with your operations without harming. And sustainability is actually measured in various ways. There's the impact on our people, impact on the economy, and the environmental impact, the latter being our focus for today. And the UN recently created a sustainability framework with goals, 17 goals, which we need to strive for. And you'll note in the large corporates that they mention these in their sustainability reports, and they target some of those 17 goals in their sustainable goals. So when we design facilities and operations and processes, we strive to be sustainable. As Gary mentioned earlier, we look to optimize on land usage, reduce building footprints, we install solar, we do LED lights, and even inside our operations, the materials handling equipment also strives to be more efficient. And at the end of the day, a sustainable operation is an efficient operation. So a lot of the people say that going green is expensive, and modern shareholders, employees, and customers are demanding so much more from companies to adopt sustainable practices. And we are reluctant at times to consider green initiatives since there's this perception that green is expensive, but there's a lot of free green around. Manfred has also mentioned this. It's solar, there's waste heat from refrigeration plants, and those are easy ROIs to achieve from these, since it is basically free. But also the smart investment for both your pocket and the environment is to choose proven technology. And there's a continuous drive from all industries to make equipment more energy efficient, and we need to learn from these markets. There's also scenarios where we were forced to look closer at how we spend our resources, like the water crisis in Cape Town, where some of the initiatives that we potentially had to implement wasn't necessarily gave a ROI, but we were forced to look at this and make immediate investments into water recycling. So how does operational efficiency help green initiatives? There are obviously various aspects in our operations to consider as part of our contribution to sustainability. But in short, an increase in productivity, efficiency, and accuracy results in increased payback, and that also means reduced energy consumption, reduced labor, reduced waste, and ultimately reduces our costs. Our panelists have spoken about sustainable buildings earlier, but let's switch a bit to the inside of a typical distribution operation. The efficiency of operations are ultimately defined by what goes on the inside of our buildings. And here are plenty of opportunities to drive efficiency and sustainability. In this picture, you can see just a few of the elements in the warehouses where we can look at being more sustainable in our operations. And I'll briefly touch on some of these in the next few slides. One of the hot topics that have come to light of late due to COVID is the question around automation and mechanization. Now, automation does come at a high cost, but it also delivers high performance and high accuracy. And when we consider automation in the light of sustainability, it comes down to optimization, cutting down on excess travel, better resource allocation, reduced energy, and reduced labor. However, we know in South Africa, automation is a bit of a challenge. With high unemployment rates, there's a lack of skilled technicians to maintain our automation. And you also need to do that comparison of manual labor versus automation. So there's always a viability to look at in more detail. Another way of digitizing our operations is warehouse management systems, or WMS. These systems have become almost standard in any warehouse operation to drive efficiency. And in this day and age of data analytics and information, one cannot afford not to have a proper WMS in place or to ignore it. With the right analytics in place, we can gain enormous amount of insight into the operation in real time to optimize our operations. And similar to automation, WMS optimizes various activities and resources in the warehouse, whether it is automated or manual, together with assistance of technology, of course. It plans for shortest routes, manages congestion between resources, we improve pick rates, and we optimize machine travel. Overall, improving our efficiency and once again being more sustainable inside our DCs. One of the biggest consumers of energy in our facilities is the battery charging areas. The green trends that we've seen in battery charging is making use of high frequency modular chargers, which optimizes on the amount of energy required based on the current battery level coming in for charge. Battery management systems have also become a lot more common to ensure we cycle our batteries properly and give us that red light when it's imminent to start replacing our batteries. There's also been a significant progress in the lithium-ion battery market, and although it's still quite expensive in comparison with your conventional lead-acid systems, we do get increased cycles and longer life out of these batteries. And because lithium-ion is able to hold its charge longer than the equivalent size lead-acid battery, that means that lithium-ion batteries can be smaller, which in turn takes less space on the machine. We can potentially reduce our machine sizes, which means our racking aisles and areas can potentially be made smaller. However, it is important to know that each operation has its own limitations and should obviously be considered by case, or should be considered case by case. And all of the above obviously results in reduced total energy consumption. If we move on to the next slide, if we look at what we send to our stores each day and how we pick the goods, we can identify a few measures of how we can minimize waste in the operation. For starters, if we look at avoiding making use of once-off plastics, we intend to use a lot of shrink wrap in our operations. Now, these are obviously very effective, but we must ensure that we are able to recover that plastic back from our stores for responsible recycling. Our operations also generate a lot of cardboard. We send goods to stores in cardboards and should also ensure that's also recovered in some and reused in some shape or form. The more sustainable approach is to look at stores and crates, which can totes and crates, which can be reused multiple times. Dollies, pallets, and roll cages obviously go hand in hand with these. The challenge with returnable equipment, obviously, that it requires a proper infrastructure to return these and to maintain them at your DCs. If we look at the roll containers, dollies, and crates, these obviously get very soiled at store and during transport. There's minimal cost associated with getting these returnable assets back from store since the truck is running back empty. However, there's significant water and electricity that goes into cleaning and maintaining these. Now, we have implemented a few roll container and crate washing solutions for our clients where the equipment goes through a machine to get washed. The basic process is just filling a tank with water, heating the water by means of a diesel or electric boiler, that going through its washing cycles and finally going through a drying cycle. Now, through the years, we have learned various ways of saving energy to cut down on electrical costs, water consumption, and the use of detergents being washed down the drain. For example, on a recent project we are working on, we're actually making use of the waste heat from a refrigeration plant to preheat the water going into the machine. These generally run at 60 degrees Celsius, so you're saving that energy going from cold water to the 60 degrees immediately without investing anything other than a bit of insulated piping. Another application, we used centrifugal dryers compared to conventional blower units. These were a lot more energy efficient than your blower units. And also we were able to recover some of the water in this process coming off the crates and the roll containers. And then we also implemented water filtration systems. The conventional crate washing setup used to dump water once a day, and we actually moved from dumping water once a day to every 3 weeks, and saving an enormous amount of water. If we then move on to waste recycling, along with these assets that are returned from stores, there's space on the vehicles to return this waste and plastic from the stores. And we've seen some of the chains do this, rolling out incentive programs for the stores to motivate their stores to send back as much cardboard and plastic as they can. And then that way we optimize our recycling through the whole supply chain. And it also helps us to create one central point of recycling versus having multiple points at stores, and that eventually costing more money. We've also seen where people have used recycled cardboard, where they make pallets or briquettes to fuel boilers and make energy. That's also a free source of fuel. And I think what we need to understand is that recycling has actually become a profit center. We used to pay someone to come and collect our waste and our excess cardboard, and now we're able to sell cardboard bales back to the paper mills and actually recover some of these costs. So that has definitely become a big motivator to reduce waste to landfill. And then just moving off to my last slide, Andy's spoken about this in much more detail, but the importance of this cannot be stressed enough. There's a lot of surplus food which is generated from our stores, which can be purposely used in our communities. Products approaching expiry dates or slightly bruised or damaged is taken off the shelves, but is actually perfectly fit for consumption. Other ways and means are selling these products to staff or communities within the area. On the picture on the bottom right, you can see a mini warehouse where products from stores are consolidated and made available to the public. And they call it as a pay as you feel, and not putting a price tag on it in order to sustain poor people in the community. And this was a project that was launched in the UK in 2016 called the Real Food Project, just to connect people with more affordable food. There's also other final alternatives if food isn't fit for consumption of burning food, which is beyond the point of safe consumption, to produce biogas for alternative uses, like the New Horizons waste to energy plant in Athlone here in Cape Town. But the target at the end of the day should still be zero landfill. So I'll leave you with this last thought from the documentary, A Life on Our Planet. Greg obviously also enjoyed that documentary a lot. Thanks for listening, everyone. I trust all of you can at least take one learning from today's session and towards a more sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anton, for that presentation of yours. I see we are already past 10 o'clock, so unfortunately there's no time for any further discussions or Q&A. If there are any burning questions that you may still have, please feel free to send us an email or give us a call, and we will reach out to the various presenters and present the questions to them. Please also keep an eye out on our next event. So just as a final thought, thank you to all our presenters, Andy, Greg, Manfred, Gary, and Anton. I really do appreciate you attending. And then also to our remaining participants and attendees, thank you for staying until the end. Gary, any closing words from your side?
I just want to thank everyone who participated. I'm happy to stay on for questions so that we can keep the presentation open. If the other guys have to leave, they can. If anyone...
You've just muted
me. Sorry, somebody. You're always happy to contact us at Relog. Get hold of us and feel free. We are at the office, and feel free to pop in for a good cup of coffee for those who are in Cape Town. And otherwise, I hope everyone's healthy and keeps well and has a sustainable day.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
I don't see any questions, so thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.